What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel for another episode of Sailboat's Customizations. Today, I'm going to be making another Yeezy 350 4D sole swap hybrid. Let's hop into it. I'm really excited for another sole swap hybrid here, and this specific pair is actually for Lola. Let's take a quick look at the pairs that we're going to be swapping. The pairs in question today, some Yeezy 350 V2 triple whites, and a pair of Adidas 4D ZX carbons. Let's take a closer look at these pairs of kicks, and then we'll get into the detachment process. The first pair in question was a pair of Adidas Yeezy 350 triple whites. I'm a big fan of triple whites because they give me a blank canvas to work on. This specific pair was actually traded for at SneakerCon Bay Area 2021, and I got them in an absolutely amazing steal of a trade. The next pair in question was the Adidas ZX carbons. The Adidas ZX carbons are a 3D printed midsole. However, this pair we didn't use in the final swap because the components just did not match up appropriately with the Yeezy components. That's something that I'll talk about a little bit later in this video. Now, the first step in any sole swap hybrid is detaching the uppers from the actual soles of the shoes. If you guys have seen any of the previous videos that I've done for my sole swap hybrids, you know that my preferred method is to use a steam gun with sparing hits of acetone. I try to utilize acetone as minimally as possible because I don't want to damage the actual components of the shoes, and if I'm going to be trying to do a sole swap hybrid, I need to keep everything as intact and as close to as original form as possible. Luckily, both of these pairs separated pretty easily using the steam gun and the acetone method. The second step of any sole swap hybrid is to prep all of the surfaces that you're working with. Now, there are a number of different ways to do this depending on the surfaces, but for this project, heat and then acetone on cotton balls was the best move because it was not going to damage any of the surfaces and would get them as clean as possible. Since the last time that we checked in, a lot of work has been done on these two pairs of kicks. This pair of Adidas ZX runners has had the uppers and the soles separated from one another, and these Yeezy 350 have also been separated and prepped. Let's go ahead and get into the customization process. So I'm now into the dyeing process for the soles. We have a couple of dyes that have actually already been prepared. Let's take a quick look at the process of that, and I will For dyeing the soles, I used a combination of RIT dye as well as Angelus suede dye. What I found during this process is that even though the colors are more vibrant with the Angelus suede dye, that dye does tend to fade a bit more quickly after a couple of wears. So in this situation of dyeing soles, I do find that RIT dye probably has the most permanence and gives some of the best color tones possible. Alright guys, it's actually been a little bit since I've worked on this project. I'm gonna be honest with you, I got insanely discouraged because it turns out the sole from the 4D and the upper from the 350 just don't match up correctly. The 4D midsole is just way too small to actually comfortably house the Yeezy 350 upper, and the upper from these 4D shoes are way too small for the soles on the Yeezy 350s. Unfortunately, I put in a ton of work and effort to dye and separate this pair, and guess what? Just not even gonna use it. And I actually got in a new pair from GOAT that I'm going to be utilizing for the 4D sole. So here I have a brand new pair of Adidas ZX 4000s. This is a shoe that I am quite fond of. I know exactly how it fits. Needless to say, I'm really excited to get to work because I actually know what the hell I'm doing when I'm working with this specific pair of 4D kicks. I gotta go through the whole process of getting the soles separated again, dyeing the soles, and getting everything prepped. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to bang out all that work today. So let's go ahead and get started with that process. For the separation process on the ZX 4000s, I used the steam gun and acetone method. Since I've separated so many pairs of this specific shoe before, I knew that this was going to be an efficient method, and these separated very quickly and easily. Step number 5 was continued prep work to remove the excess glue from the soles of the ZX 4000s, the uppers of the ZX 4000s, and the uppers of the Yeezy 350s. You'll notice that I did use a razor blade at times on the uppers, and as long as you're delicate with it, it can definitely be a very handy tool. I also ended up with access to a Dremel tool, and I was able to use that on the uppers of the ZX 4000s, and as long as you're careful with it, that can also come in handy, but is definitely a learned skill.
Obviously, I am in a little bit of a different setup than normal. I'm over at the San Diego Custom Footwear Warehouse. I've been helping them out all day, and now that I'm done with the work around the building, I'm going to be working on dyeing the uppers and the 4D midsoles of this custom pair that I'm working on for Lola. I'm going to be utilizing my airbrush to apply this, so I'm going to have to prep up appropriately to make sure that everything goes smoothly. Let's get down to it.
So this part of the process is where a lot of things went wrong with this project. What I found out very quickly is that using Angelus suede dye definitely does not go quite as well on mesh surfaces. On both the uppers for the Yeezy 350s and the ZX 4000s, a lot of the Angelus suede dye that I used actually rinsed out quite quickly when it came to the washing and rinsing of the excess dye. The uppers of the 350s definitely held on to the hand-painted dye quite a bit better, but honestly, most of it got rinsed out during the washing and rinsing of the excess dye process, which is something that we're about to talk about. I've made some very good progress when it comes to this Sole Swap hybrid project. It took a little bit of extra time having to get the ZX 4000s in, but now that I finally have them here, they've been separated, dyed, prepped, and they're just about ready to go. The Yeezys are a little bit of a different story. While the soles have dyed up very nicely, the uppers lost a ton of dye. Let's take a closer look at these two pairs before we get into the next phase of this project. So let's start off talking about the ZX 4000 uppers on the Yeezy 350 soles. These things dyed up super nicely. I'm a huge fan of this color gradient right here, the uppers of the ZX 4000s. These lateral suede portions used to be gray. The rest of the suede on the shoe used to be this kind of deep royal blue color. I actually dyed that purple. You'll also see a bit of a blue tint on the mesh. Some of it washed out pretty substantially, but other portions of it tended to stay a little bit better. Most of my dye also washed out of the actual liner of the shoe too. The Angelus suede dye does not do a good job on mesh-like surfaces and tends to wash out rather quickly. Next up, we got the Yeezy 350 uppers with the 4D soles. These 4D soles actually do take the Angelus suede dye quite nicely. Now as we move on to the uppers here, you guys will notice how much these lightened up actually going through the washing process. Now all of these lower portions here where there's this kind of protective glue takes on that dye very readily, but the uppers of the Yeezy 350s I've found to be a very challenging material to do a good dye job on. I was really looking for a more substantial and deeper color blue. I have to re-dye the uppers for the Yeezy 350 so then that way I could get a nice deep color. So the next couple steps here, prep work for gluing this pair up, re-dye for the Yeezy 350 uppers. By the end of tonight, we'll have one pair bonded and ready to go. Let's hop right into it so you guys can see this part of the process. So at this point in the project, I was running on a little bit more of a time crunch, and I had to try and do multiple things at once. What I ended up doing was prepping the ZX 4000 uppers and the Yeezy 350s to get them all glued.
I applied my barge super stick cement to both surfaces and then let it cure for about 2 hours before I bonded those surfaces together. During those 2 hours, I went ahead to actually dye the uppers of the Yeezy 350s using RIT dye. If you check out the time in the background, you'll see it took me about an hour to do that. Afterwards, I bonded together the uppers of the ZX 4000s to the soles of the Yeezy 350s. After I had bonded a majority of the parts together, I ended up adding extra glue to all of the parts that maybe didn't have enough glue to create a solid bond between the surfaces before I went ahead and reheated everything to create a nice solid bond. At this point in time, I was coming to a major time crunch for this project. I didn't even have time to record what the uppers of the 350s looked like after I rinsed them from the second dyeing attempt. Here you can see that I'm actually dyeing them for the third time on a lunch break that I had at work. Luckily, third time turned out to be a charm because when I washed and rinsed them this time, a lot of the dye actually took and ended up staying in the uppers of the 350s. After that, it was time to bond them to the soles of the ZX 4000s, and here you can see that I'm gluing everything together, and after 2 hours of letting that glue sit and set, I ended up bonding everything together. You can see that I do add a little bit of extra glue during this process because there are some spots that I missed initially.
Hey Lola, can I grab you real quick?
Yeah.
I need help with something. I wanted to get your opinion on these. These are yours?
No way. They're so pretty. They're the color of your label too.
These are also yours.
This is your project you've been working on.
Yeah.
These are awesome. I'm gonna wear them this weekend. Oh, they look so good.
You like them?
I do, I like them a lot. That's so exciting! I have Sailboat Customs! Oh, they fit perfect. They fit so good. Oh, these feel great too. Oh my gosh. Man. Look at that.
Yay!
Thanks, baby.
So we last left off with me surprising Lola with her brand new shoes, and unfortunately that was about 2.5 months ago. You guys already know that we moved from San Diego to New York, and I did not have a chance to film any sort of closing comments, so here we are. Let's talk a little bit about these two pairs of shoes, and I'll show you guys some close-ups of the finished shots of these pairs. So first, we'll talk a little bit about the ZX 4000 uppers on the Yeezy 350 sole. Like I mentioned before, I'm extremely happy with the dye job on these soles. I think that the color came out really nicely and the gradient is looking awesome. Lola's actually worn these a couple of times and she says that they are very, very comfortable. All of the suede seems to have held onto the dye really well. However, as I mentioned before, a lot of the dye actually rinsed out of the mesh on the uppers. So there are a couple of places that almost look stained because of the dye and it's not even on both sides, but overall it still looks kind of cool. And it gives this neon green color a little bit of a kind of cool color effect. Next, we'll move on to the Yeezy 350 upper with the 4D soles. It might be kind of hard to tell from the previous video, but I actually had to dye the uppers on these 3 individual times because it kept rinsing all the way out when I tried to rinse the excess dye from the uppers. Eventually, I ended up using a tie-dye powder that I had to hand paint on, but it actually ended up with the coolest effect in the deepest coloration as far as the uppers were concerned. I used the Angelus suede dye on the midsoles of these shoes. With a couple of wears, it seems like this dye is actually lightening up quite a bit, but I think it's gonna make for a really cool effect once these shoes have been worn a whole bunch and the midsoles start to fade ever so slightly. Overall, both of these projects came out really, really well. I'm extremely happy with the alignment of these shoes, and from what I understand, the comfort is there on both pairs for sure as well. There are a couple of lines where I did overglue on the shoes, and I might have to go back and clean up some of the excess glue. This is one of the cleaner sole swap hybrids that I've ever put together, and I'm really pumped on the way that they turned out. I'm really curious to hear what you guys think about these kicks though, so please let me know in the comments below which of the two is your favorite pair and what you like or dislike about them. If you guys enjoyed what you saw in today's video, take an extra moment to click that like and subscribe button. It only takes a couple of extra seconds, and doing so goes a long way in helping to support this channel and helps me to push out more content like this for you guys in the future. If you guys want to keep up to date with all the projects that we got going on and all of the inventory for sale, make sure that you check out www.sailboatsupplies.xyz. Or if you want to stay up to date on a day-to-day basis, make sure that you tap in on social media at Sailboat Supplies. I definitely appreciate everybody that came through to watch today's video. This was one of the more challenging and time-consuming projects that I've had to do in a long time, but in the end, everything came out really, really well, and I'm really excited about the results. Thank you to everybody that stuck around until the cold, bitter end of this video. And you guys already know, I'm Sailboat, and I'm out of here.